out again. We're going to talk today about our mission plans for 2014. We thought it would be more comfortable working in the sanctuary today. That gives us more comfort, but it also then really puts some time constraints on us. Charles is going to be our timekeeper, so we can get out of it on time. If we could begin with prayer. Dear Lord, thank you again for this time to come together to discuss our mission and ministry, what you're calling us to do in your name. We look forward to open and honest dialogue with some of the challenges and issues we face. We look to you for guidance and wisdom. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we're going to try to be pretty crisp today, but we do want to make sure that we get all the questions and answered. This is the second in a two-part series. Marissa is taping again. We are going to send you the link. Last week's session is up on YouTube in 8 glorious parts. So any questions, you can go back and review the presentation and questions from last week. This session will also be put up. We had a little bit of learning last time, so it will be a little bit fewer pieces, but it will still be just as long. So we're going to try and use all the technology available to us. We will also try and send out answers to questions. We've only got a few questions so far, but please mail your questions in if you have them. So today's agenda we're going to just quickly go over the objectives. We're going to quickly review a couple of things from last week, just in case the folks weren't here, what the priorities are that our mission and ministry are for 2014. A very quick summary of council's recommendation that was presented last week. Based on that discussion, Jan has done some work. Just so you understand, if we make different assumptions and we make different trade-offs, there are different options. We are not presenting a new spending plan. We're just making sure that you understand that if we make different assumptions, we can do different things. If we have time, I'll quickly go over the call process. I'll quickly go over, we're going to vote on changes to the Constitution next week, and Q&A. It looks like it's going slow. I'm going to jump to the Q&A process, because I think that's probably the most important thing to take about. So again, this week, as last week, our goal, our purpose, is to make sure you understand the assumptions and the plan forward for the mission and ministry in 2014 and how that plan is supported by the spending. We want to make sure that you understand we looked at options and alternatives. There certainly are options and alternatives, but they involve different trade-offs. And the question is, you need to pray and think about how those different trade-offs affect us as a congregation, affect our ability to deliver on mission and ministry. And then if we get a chance, change the model constitution. I'm not sure it's shifting that. I think they're very important changes, but they're pretty minor. And if you read the mailing you got, it should see it, but I'm going to try and allow for time. Okay, so what we presented last week, what council debated on the last year, and in fact, this has been what council and we as a congregation have been struggling with for the past several years. Looking forward, we believe that our call, our mission ministry, what we need to do and focus on is strengthen our youth ministry. We need to foster spiritual growth in youth and young families so that we can be vibrant and growing in community of faith. We need to strengthen the discipleship of all the members so that we can live out our faith and move forward. And the last and most important point is we think that the professional staff, the called staff that we have supporting our mission and ministry is a fundamental foundation of our ability to deliver, and we need to ensure that they're properly supported and execute. summary of the plan the council put forward that we spent time on last week. The key points there, what I didn't put up there is we think we made significant progress in stabilizing the office by bringing Laura in. We struggled last year with some staff issues. We struggled the year before. We believe we now have we're blessed with having a wonderful person in the front office. I hope you'll get time to meet her.
She starts
full-time this week. But we believe that is a fundamental and foundational step forward to really stabilize the staff. But basically, what we're going to step forward with in 2014 is council has made a recommendation to you that we begin the process of seeking an associate pastor. Based on a set of constraints and assumptions about the future, we made a recommendation that it be a part-time term call. Part-time is less than full-time, and there's been some questions about what that means, and I'll get back to that. But quickly in summary, until we actually talk to Synod, until we actually form the call committee, and until we actually see what candidates are available, the dimensions of that part-time are still in flux. Thank you. That was the word I was reaching for. But the goal would be to find a person who is called to serve the youth primarily, will help us strengthen our youth ministry. That would be the primary focus of this person, but also then to give the pastor a partner in ministry. That's the reason we thought it should be a call professional in that they'll bring the depth of theological training and grow our ability to serve faith formation in the congregation. Back on. The constraints, though, why is it part-time and why do we limit the term? Income trends have been down for the past couple of years, I think partly reflecting the troubles in the economy, and partly reflecting the changing nature of the congregation. So we took those into consideration. So for that reason, we said we didn't really think, without cutting benevolence, that we could fund a full-time pastor. The other assumption we made was that in the short term, giving was not going to increase dramatically in such a way that we could step out and make that kind of call. However, we did want you to know that there are options and alternatives and other scenarios, and we're going to talk for a few minutes this morning about what one scenario, or how many scenarios you're doing, one or two, one-ish, two-ish. We're going to let you see what other options are so that you, as you do your prayer and discernment and thinking, next week you can come in. We'll talk a little bit about somewhere in here about the process for next week so that next week doesn't erupt into chaos and we're not here for the rest of our natural lives trying to refine it. But we'll talk about that in Jan. It is a standard practice that where we communicate to the individual that we recruit that we have a finite vision for the call. In this case, we're thinking almost 3 years. So it is a standard practice and it is well documented and practiced.
Apparently that was written as. Okay.
My question is, will somebody
well, that's one of the things that we're going to have to discover. And I would suggest that at least one of the assumptions that may underpin our plan, actually, until we begin the process, we won't know. But I don't really think we're going to recruit somebody who's going to move in for that. But that we won't know. We won't know until we start.
My understanding also is that if we get someone fresh out of seminary, they may want something that's not a forever cut call. But this is a starting position. I'm sorry, Pastor, you wanted to say something?
That's one possibility. Okay, the other point is when you do a term call and you're hoping that it will continue, you put in otherwise, the incentive is that we're hoping that this person will stay.
We don't have, I'm sorry, we don't, the numbers do not support that.
Well, but there might be, we just have to, we have to take the first step.
We don't ever get on this, I totally agree with that, but I just don't want people to believe that what we have here is a plan that's sustainable. It's not.
So is Dan,
Yeah.
A quick question about widening that net, and answering the question about availability. Actually, you don't need this, though. Okay. About availability, location, etc., is whether or not, in keeping with ELCA practice, this turn call person could be from any one of the full communion, 6 full communion denominations, which is a common practice now. So that means UCC, Presbyterian, Episcopal, they would all be possible candidates, and we might widen our net.
Well, let's go ahead and get into what some of the alternatives are so you can see what's happening. When I heard last week that the consideration was that, wait, turn this down. This seems awful, that. Can you turn that over? I mean, anyway, I'll keep talking. So when I heard that we were thinking that this was going to be a 30-hour-a-week person, I got concerned because I did not feel that the numbers would support 30 hours a week. So I went to the Senate guidelines and tried to see what we've got there. So, and Senate guidelines are guidelines, they're not requirements, and we're not actually even meeting the total Senate guidelines for Pastor Chris. We're beneath the Senate guidelines for Pastor Chris, just so you know. So I looked though at something that was kind of comparable to what we're doing here. They have a range for someone 0 to 1 year, and 45,000 is about in the middle of that. The minimum for housing is 18,000. There's been some conversation you cannot afford housing for 18,000 in this area, and that's absolutely true. They actually suggest that you do 1% of an average housing value for equivalent of a month's salary, and then multiply that by 12. If we did that, that would jack that 63 up even higher than that if we kept it at 45. But it seemed to me that the 63 was kind of in line with it. This is, if you look at your spending plan numbers, that's not the exact number that's in there for estimates, because that's the 3% increase that's being suggested is in a separate line. So that's with it. So just want to let you know that FICA is a standard thing. The benefits, the reason that benefits increase as a percentage is because the health care costs are relatively but not totally fixed. That we do benefit over here by the fact that there is a maximum that they make you pay. So they don't charge you more than the maximum step.
So on the Senate guidelines, for the number of years that the person has experience,
Yes.
that is in the up to 4 years range?
That is 0 to 1. If you look, there's a backup page, page 5, that gives you what all those are. Also,
Everybody's a little only numbers called
that's what these numbers are based on. Anything is possible. There are unlimited possibilities. I just did one set of numbers so you can see, but anything that we go for more experience, that means that we have to cut more, raise more, whatever. But everything, I'm not suggesting what we need to do. I'm just saying, here's a set of numbers and how you would get there. Also, just to let you know, the Senate guidelines are not different for an associate pastor versus a person with a master's degree that is not an ordained minister. So that was some of the discussion too. Can we call someone that had a master's? So there's not a difference in the salary, and it seems to be more flexibility to go for someone who's ordained.
To my understanding of this area, typically, you're gonna have, unless you have somebody who does already live in the area, housing costs here can be like $2,000 a month. That's like $25,000 a year. You're talking about asking somebody to come and live in poverty state.
If you consider that they just have that 18,000, what I'm considering is that they have the 63. You know, so part of that salary and housing together is in that 63. It's a starting salary for 63. And if you want to jack that up, be my guest. It's just,
But the amount that was,
when I did talk,
the setting plan for looking at it for 33 months was, okay, 35.
no, what's in the spending plan for 9 months is 30,000.
Right.
So it doesn't even cover 9 months at 20 hours a week.
With the assumption you made about that,
That's absolutely correct. You would have to, so when I talked to Scott Schottenbach to find out, you know, just kind of what the ranges were, because we were thinking maybe you could do it for 70 all in. He said, no, that's too low. But he thought that this would be reasonable. Now, that's not official, that's not, but it seems to also be in line with what we're paying our lead pastor. I think if you jack this up even more, then this starts to be more out of whack.
well, two points I want to make to help understand. We're trying to give you information so you understand. But remember, the first step, if we decide to go forward with the whole process, is that we must sit down in the Synod and review the financial plan, whereby they will reflect back to us whether they think the plan will work, whether they support the plan, and until we can actually have that step, we're just trying to figure out ways forward. We must get your guidance to see if this is even something you want us to move forward. And then we have to get that feedback. And then yes, Jeff, we need to deal with all of those questions. We're your second.
Jan, do all associates in ministry have master's degrees, or are there aides that do not have master's degrees?
Yes.
That would be at a lower salary class?
Yes, not much.
Not much, meaning not many?
Not much lower in terms of salary. The bachelor's degree versus the master's degree. And I thought for what we were looking for, we were probably looking for someone who got a master's degree. But that can change.
Again, that's all the assumptions that once we launch the call committee, they're going to have to work and refine and move forward.
I mean, Marie, it's maybe a couple of $1,000 difference.
If we have a plan that we thought we had some reasonableness to it, and the Senate thought it was reasonable, is the idea that you go out and you say, okay, we're looking for people with these qualifications, and this is what we can pay, and then see if somebody who's willing, who has a qualification, is willing to take the
Right, it
job.
comes to negotiation, yes.
But the negotiation doesn't happen up front, is my
Right,
understanding.
right.
You have a negotiation based on, I mean, you have a call process whether people feel that they discern that this is a match from a congregation. The Synod knows what we can pay. They know like what the debt situation is for the candidate or whatever. They wouldn't put somebody into the process that they would think would be a total mismatch. But you don't negotiate salary up front.
Okay, but I guess I don't quite understand, like, when in the process, when we get to the point that somebody said, okay, I've gone this far, I really don't know what you're paying, everybody tells me it's okay, but I'm at the point where I love this, and you love me, and now let's talk money, and oh my gosh, I can't afford that. Could we be getting into that, or?
The Synod would try not to get us into that.
They're partnering the call process to sort of prevent things like that from happening.
But let me just, the meat of this is really our trade-off, so I don't want to spend too much time.
Okay, so we have to go through the whole constitutional process that we did with the whole
Yes, I have slides on that again. It's not quite as rigorous, but yes, basically, the process. I have slides on that.
How many months does that assume to take?
it's going to take,
Right now in the plan, we had this person started in March, is that right?
yes, but it doesn't matter. We have $30,000 in the plan for this year, whether it starts March 1st or December 1st.
But if it's someone out of cemetery, if that's the case, it would be more like mid-year.
Right.
And that's a fast process.
We have to get started. We have to get started. Denise?
Someone asked me at a group meeting in our house and wanted to know if there was a possibility of someone living in a home.
Yeah. Oh, there's lots of creative ways that we can come together as a congregation to support this process. So yes, if someone who's able to open their home,
If that would be something that the candidate would be interested in.
until we get much further, we need, the message I think we're trying to present is, there's lots of questions, but until we get an indication that we should start, we're not going to be able to get to the level of detail that everybody would like us to get to. But certainly before we finish the process, we have to be at that level of detail. Suzanne first.
Do we know what the job description is? Do we, as a congregation, have any job description for perhaps an associate pastor versus hiring lay people as we've done in the past? Like, what gaps are we looking to fill? And how are we defining what we're looking for?
Okay, so we don't have a job description yet. That is also something that needs to get developed. Right now, the vision we have is that we want to fill the gap in our ability to deliver mission and ministry with a focus on youth and young family. So the guidance that we would give to the call committee and in our discussion with Synod, we would start with that premise. We want to strengthen youth, we want to strengthen young families, we want to grow our ministry in those areas. And from there, we'll have to develop a more detailed job description. One of the guidance Myla has put forth is some job descriptions around faith formation folks. So we have some samples that we've looked at from other churches around faith formation for youth. So we have that. We have the work that Linda used to do to drawing. Neither of those job descriptions are what we're putting forth as the job description for this individual, but those are things that will inform the process once we move forward. And yes, we will absolutely have a job description before we finish the process.
As a follow-up, next week, will we be making a decision to either go begin the call process that you're describing here, or we're not going to go through the call process, we are going to seek lay people to fill positions that have been vacated? Are we going to be making that type of decision?
I think we need to make that decision. The motion wasn't put forward quite that way, but that's basically, or are we going to do nothing? That's another option. Yes, we need to be clear on our intentions at the end of next week. What the congregation is looking for is guidance on how to move forward. We put forward a recommendation that we think we need to move forward, seeking an associate pastor to focus on youth and faith formation with young families. We need to get your feedback. Do you support that? We will also put forward what we think the constraints are in terms of the limits of our ability to do that right now. Jan has given you some other things to think about. But yes, we need to leave with clear direction next week where you want us to go.
Or what the process is to get there.
Now, somebody over here have a question.
First, I'd just like to commend the council. I think you've done a great job on it. And I know you've given us a lot of time and effort to come up with this plan. I think that we need to an extent, we have to just take a leap of faith and let the Holy Spirit guide us and the candidates in the process. And the Synod, to be able to just move forward. I think we start with the highest expectations that, yes, we want to call an associate pastor and proceed with that. we've got a plan in place for the budget. And then once you begin working with Synod and Jay begin checking the candidates, if you need to make changes to that plan, then make them, but you gotta start someplace. So I think you start with your ideal, and if you can't reach that, then you figure out what the compromise is. But it's a leap of faith.
Don was next.
That might be better timing for my comment, which was actually going to be on real optimism. I know there's a lot, I can feel some of the anxiety or concern about all our variables, financial, job description, otherwise. But please know, there are extensive variables in creative, hopeful ways about clergy and their lifestyles. If you go back 11 years ago, I came out here, Chris was actually on leave from call and was not even really in the Senate or known for anything. In that case, it was an interim situation. But that goes on constantly. Again, I mentioned about the 6 full community partners, and we multiply that times 6 denominations and aging. And I hope we would be open to a more, possibly middle-aged or whatever person who can be also very, very good with you. But I just wanted to give a word of optimism that demographically and in lifestyle situations, there are a lot of clergy, often surprisingly available under your nose in a variety of different transitional situations for whom this could even be, I'll use your word, ideal.
All right.
Real quickly, I want to mention that this is based on Gold Plus healthcare, which is standard, but this is something where there's some vulnerability in the numbers. I used the with a spouse because that was right in the middle. It could be plus or minus 4284. If they have no spouse that needs to be covered, then we're that much to the good. If they have kids that also need to be covered, then we're short that much. But this is right in the middle. The 10% retirement is it's the minimum that the Senate ELC, I'm not sure, but it's 10 to 12%. 12% is recommended. This is currently based on 10% retirement, and for the benefits, it's based on age 30. The next slide, the considerations that I use, we have lost 55 hours of professional time between the two Lindas. Linda Walker was here, Linda Pullis was 25, and Linda Pullis, when Linda Walker left, Linda Pullis were raised, but basically 55 hours. I mentioned this about the guidelines being the same for ordained pastor and associate with a master's degree. Ordained pastor is more flexible. There's a backup slide in there in case anybody's interested about the average attendance by numbers of pastors, 1, 2, and 3. And we're really at that break point of one pastor. I believe there are likely to be fewer candidates who are seeking part-time. Not that they don't exist, they absolutely exist. But I think that the larger the field we go for, the more ability we have to be choosy. That's why one of these examples includes full-time. Plus, are we staffing for growing our ministries versus minimizing the decline? So now we get into the real numbers. If we wanted to go for a full-time pastor under the assumptions that I use for cost, there is a path to do that. We would use the 130,000 surplus, and here that's based on the 112,000 that's in there now, plus this year's surplus without the associate pastor, plus a tiny surplus for the next couple of years without the associate pastor. It all adds up to 130,000. So I said we obviously use that. Then I put in the capital fund, the 24,000 that we have in there now. There's some more being given. That is not something that everybody agrees on. My rationale for it is in the backup, but that gives us more oomph to try to get this. Those dollars were given for the capital funds that have been, for the capital expenditures that have been done, so I said put it in. This one, in order to go for a full-time pastor, we would have to reduce mission support to There's also backup in there as to why I think 13% is still a generous number. We're currently at 17.5% of giving. We were number 98, I think, out of the top 100. Let's see, what page am I looking at? Somebody, page 9. So we were number 98 out of all of the ELCA congregations.
Out of 10,000.
Out of a couple of thousand congregations. Congregations. Is that right?
Hey,
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Lots. Yes, right. So, but if I went back, they haven't reproduced that chart again, but I looked at those 100 congregations. We're now number 45 in the entire ELCA. And there are about 1,000 congregations that are larger than we are.
Not in terms of percent,
In terms of absolute dollars, there are mega-sized congregations that are contributing fewer dollars than we are. If I look at the average ELCA giving, it's 5.8. New Jersey Synod is 7.9. Even if I look at the top 50 congregations in terms of mission support giving, that average for those top 50 is 9.5. Also, if we were giving more than our, more than the average, then I would say, great, let's keep giving this. I would personally start giving more to the national church because I believe in this. But the problem is, because our giving is not disproportionately large, it's not coming out of extra giving, it's coming out of expenses, and that's the staff. So our mission support that we're so proud of is coming out of the staff. So that's okay. One of the things is if you look at our giving on average versus ELCA giving, we are giving 166% of average ELCA, but the income in this area is 186%. So we are not even keeping up with our income percent, the assets that we have. If we were giving proportionately as we are able, our giving would be 186% of the ELCA. It's not, it's 166%. So our giving is actually less than our assets would indicate that we can do.
Offering. You said there's two parts of what you just said. On the one hand, we're like way up here at the top.
Right.
On the other hand, it's here. Average giving compared to the cost of living is not so.
well, we're like the fifth most affluent county in the country.
Right.
That's right.
And it's coming out of staff expenses. It's not because we're giving more to the congregation and then we can afford to give more outside. No, we're giving actually a little less, not a whole lot, but a little less. And so that has to come from somewhere else. It's coming from what we can afford to spend on other things. If we can get giving up, awesome, we can do more. But so that this, in order to go for full-time, 13%, this has to, in order to get the numbers to work, had to get the volunteer coordinator funding through this year, but not after that. It also requires net offering increases of $8,000 a year for 3 years less I've got something. That should be 13%. That's a typo. This should be 13 and this should be 15. The numbers are right, but that's a typo. Yes, the text is wrong. So this would leave us, this is the number from the previous page. That will be the remainder to cover all other changes in income and expenses. So those are the cuts and increases that we would have to make. One path to make full-time associate pastor, and anything that we can raise more than this reduces our need to go down as far as that. For a 30-hour a week, you do this scenario calls for doing the first two things, reducing mission support to 15% level 13%. You keep the funding for the volunteer coordinator, you still have to do the offering income, and that gives you a little less to do the changes in income expenses, but close. The 20-hour-a-week version is basically what we can afford without doing significant cuts and having to raise the income.
Right. Okay, so alternatives, just nothing precise. Nancy and Judy and Derek still has a question. So go ahead, Nancy.
But Ken, I'm going to give you some of the numbers. Capital fund, does that have to pay back to the mortgage so they don't get stuck?
It's offsetting the annual monies we pay every year when we afford the mortgage.
It's using that money. We're still, either way, we're trying to avoid that balloon payment, right? We're paying for it. It's just saying, where are you getting that money from? Are you getting that money from
Income.
from income, in your income, or are you also using the giving that people have given for capital to also pay for that part?
So the next 5 years will be stuck as a blue mortgage.
We have capital dollars right now that we're holding aside.
The plan is not to have a balloon payment under any scenario.
Because we're paying a bigger mortgage payment every month than we used to.
Right. So the question is just where do you get the money from? But the balloon payment is, we're trying to avoid that in any scenario. So that's not a fact.
It's basically saying,
To pay back against the mortgage, that's what I was.
It's to use those monies rather than to have income pay for those monies.
It's now part of the operating expense that we write a check every month to pay the mortgage, and that's preventing us from having to, we're paying a bigger amount. Instead of out of our offering money.
So if you take that money out of that capital fund, you still have to pay mortgage.
no, we're going to use it to pay down the mortgage early.
Pay down the mortgage early.
And you're saying take the money from capital versus
Income.
and that frees up income.
Exactly.
Still the same money that we're making to avoid the balloon. It's just where it's coming from.
All right, hang on.
I have a question. What percentage, if we took a full-time pastor, what percentage then would salaries be of the total budget?
Here we go.
Because it was 2/3 already.
This will then raise it.
To what percent?
It was around 58 to 60%.
And this would then
2/3
increase.
last year when we went there.
No, it was 60%, because I did the numbers, it was 58, I've got,
All right. If that's a question, Nancy, we can go
I
back.
can answer those numbers.
Judy was next.
Okay, my question was also on the capital fund. I think the confusing part there is the non-capitalized part used to pay back advance from mortgage. It's not that the capital fund of 24 will be used to pay back in advance from mortgage. The capital fund will be used to pay the pastor instead of a capital.
No,
Well, then how does it?
you use it to pay the mortgage, you don't pay more than the mortgage amount. That's the amount that's going to the mortgage, and it frees up money to go to the pastor. But the reason, I also just wanted to make one quick statement here in terms of the sustainability of this, because all of these versions have $154,000 worth of non-recurring income. So in order to sustain that, we would have to replace $50,000 a year in a recurring income. That's why in year 4. Otherwise, you have to come up with some other thing. That's why I just want us to be clear about why we're doing a 3-year loan.
This only gets, these are only 3 years.
Only gets 3 years.
We still have a problem in your work. What I'd like to suggest, and I know, rather than dissecting the numbers too precisely, look at them as they're presented to say there are already options and alternatives that require changes in assumption about staffing, changes in assumptions about benefits, and is that the trade-off we want to make? We've looked at council looked at many other scenarios. There's lots of assumptions that we can make. The key is none of the assumptions that we came up with gave us a path forward beyond 3 years. None of the assumptions that we came up with saw a way to move forward without affecting benevolence. None of the ways, so that's what we have to, without more giving. If there's no more giving, we have to start making these decisions. So I think Judy or Jan would love to spend hours with anyone going through these numbers, and the key here is there are options and alternatives. We need guidance. Now, Judy was next.
On the capital fund, is it reasonable to use the entire balance in this assumption, given that we probably have to replace 2 units?
Again, that's exactly another, yes, that's the right question. That's one, this is one approach, one way to do it. It may
Is there
not
more money expected to come into the capital fund still?
be a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Not in the current program without again going back and trying to get more giving there. The whole key comes down to giving.
I noticed that we're talking about another way to free up income would be to eliminate funding for the volunteer coordinator.
Again,
So what does that do? So what does that do to the overall operation of our volunteer, which is
You have to do it you have to figure out a way to do it without.
we have to spread that work back into other places.
Or you have to raise another $34,000. But it at least says we have a plan, we're not stuck, knowing that there's no way to get there.
Okay.
My question is more of a procedural nature. First of all, these are 3 options.
Just to give you ideas.
Exactly. 3 set of assumptions. Again, appreciate all the work Jim and putting all those people together. But we have a whole bunch of options. The bottom line is next Sunday, we're going to come together and vote on a budget. And in that budget, there is $30,000
Correct.
to spend for associate pastor for 2014. We have to look at that budget and approve it as is, or approve it with an amendment that allows additional flexibility for the council to go out and look for somebody all the way up to a full-time associate pastor. So the procedure question is, how do we want to approach this next Sunday? We want somebody to offer an amendment to the budget that says we want to give council an additional $20,000 or such.
There is a process, and I was going to cover that at the end. If you look at your spending plan, there's a form that we request you use to submit motions to the spending plan. What we request is in order to be as prepared as we can, you're always welcome to make motions from the floor, please. We're not changing that. But if you have a really substantive motion, if you could send it to us ahead of time so we can process it, please do. So there's a form and there's a process for making motions from the floor. There's a form and a process for getting the motions in ahead of time. If you get them in ahead of time, we'll try and publish them so that everybody can see them, like we did last year. And the other change we made this year is we sort of left the meeting next week sort of open-ended. Chris and I and Chris are going to work on some way to facilitate it so that it's productive. But the other thing I would caution us all is trying to build a spending plan at that meeting next week with 90 different people, or 100, however many of them, trying to, it was hard enough for the 12 of us on council to do this. We're going to accept the process, but the other thing you have the option to do is to vote the plan down and say we don't support it, go back, and we'll have to come back again. You don't have to approve the spending plan. But the other thing is I don't believe process-wise we can ever build a spending plan from the floor next week.
Will next week be the time that we decide if we're going for the full-time 40-hour, the part-time 30-hour, or 20-hour? Is that not the time? I'm just curious how that or when that happens.
Okay, so in reality, I don't think we're going to be that precise in the call unless somebody puts a motion forward next week that drives that level of precision. What we're trying to get is approval for a level of funding, a sense that you want to move forward with the call process, and then we've discussed it with you. It's been a partnership. We then form a call team. We notify the city. I forget which one we do first. We call the city first. Then we form a call committee, and then we move forward. But we're trying to get an indication, is this even the direction you want us to go? Okay? Yeah.
Am I correct in assuming that we are going to go to the spending plan, and there's a second motion somewhere in the agenda that says that we authorize council to move forward?
There was actually, I did not include that motion.
Because I think there's different issues.
Right.
I think the congregation is going to spending plan number one, and then have a second motion that authorizes council to move forward, and if that is approved, then we go forward with the job description meeting with council.
That's a good, let's add that recommendation, but that was not included in the agenda thus far. We were operating sort of under the assumption, but I think you're right, let's be intentional.
If you're going to change benevolence in one of these scenarios,
There's no change in this year in the
spending plan is
Not this year in the spending plan was before. Okay, so if everybody's okay, we'll add another motion, as Dan said. Good idea, to be very precise and intentional. And we'll do that. Stephanie's idea is that we do that first. I think the order in which we do it, I think there's pros and cons to both ways.
You got the spending plan, you can't go forward with the.
Right, that's what I'm saying, obvious.
So you have to do the spending plan first, once that's approved, we put the other one.
That's sort of why that's why I said the pros and cons. Hang on, we got, well, go ahead.
Can we offer a third motion that says we hire somebody in the interim because the call process is going to take a long time and the need is urgent?
You can do that. I don't believe we actually need a motion to do that. We can always do supply pastor, or you're suggesting something different.
Well, I think with our emphasis on youth, I would guess we wouldn't get a call person here until September. That means we're going to go from now till September with basically pastor handling everything, except for the administrative stuff.
But then if that motion comes up, that also then affects the spending.
Wait for
Because
that.
there's
Not even still have money for a pastor.
There's no money there for that either. This plan right now
Well,
is
I
a
mean, my
deficit plan.
difficulty is I don't see how we're going to get from here to there
Okay, you're right.
without going down so much that it would be very difficult for a new person to come in and
I appreciate that. Again, we have 5 minutes.
And this is more procedural, but it seems to me there's like about 4 questions here. One is, does the congregation want to go ahead with things? Why is this decision that the congregation want to go ahead with things such as pastor and bring a call? And then the second question is hanging on that. Might as well probably reduce the donations to the Senate and legal that. We're going to use the capital existing surplus and capital funds to pay down mortgage, and we're going to make the volunteer
There's
three big pieces that do that. I think that's the question. But I would ask that question. In fact, I could ask that question right now, because there's not any sense on this for this week. And actually, with 100 people there, all the more confusing.
I'll hold that in advance. Thank you. You're right. You summarized. We have income on one side, desires on the other. Right now, income is not substantiate all that we want to do with mission and ministry with our heart. And we're struggling with ways forward. Bonnie brings up, well, the concern is if we don't act appropriately and quickly, we'll be in trouble. I actually am much more hopeful, and I hope that we listen to Don's message as well, that there's reason to be hopeful. Council tried to put forward a plan forward. We believe that the plan we put forward does address the concerns about the current situation and moving forward. But yes, nothing is going to be quick. But we have to decide about all the trails, of course. Council's job was to discern as best we could how to make those trails. We made a low-risk recommendation. There are other scenarios. We didn't want to pretend there weren't. The scenario we put forward, we felt was a reasonable path forward. But we can get the message from you that we need to be more aggressive or less aggressive. I'll come back to your recommendation in your scroll, perhaps. Jeff.
As a faith community, there's a lot of times when you need to step up and make decisions about which way to go. The other thing that was a faith community we have with signs. I think there are signs in terms of the drop in membership, the drop in giving, that I think are telling us that there's a problem that has to really get addressed, and addressed quickly. To me, I think it's a better plan, a better option to go for somebody who is a professional, who can come in probably sooner than an associate pastor, who can get started working, we can figure out whether they can be full-time or part-time. I think for less money, we don't have to get involved with all this, the questionability of the term call versus, part-time and all the little stuff. I think that we need to get moving. We need to get somebody who can deal with faith formation, deal with youth. I think the types of pastors we're going to find that are part-time are more likely second career. And I want somebody, I think, who can really relate to the youth, who can bring some enthusiasm to what has to be done at that age levels. And so that's what I really need to see what the cost would be for that option. I think there's a lot of things, a lot of assumptions in here.
And that's what we need to discern next week. We all have a different sense about those assumptions. Thank you, Jeff. What council needs next week is a clear message from the congregation on how we made our recommendation on a way forward. That's what our recommendation is. We've heard passionate pleas about other ways forward. We need a clear signal from you. The bottom line, I think, that is we need to, as Jeff said, we need to act. And based on the signals we get and the feedback we get, we'll set the direction. We can be more aggressive as Jan shows. That's not good. But, or as Jeff says, we can try and go faster by taking a different path. The key is we're constrained by income today. We're constrained by and I don't mean this to be negative, but our commitment to benevolence is a constraint. And those two things we have to deal with on any plan forward. Sure.
Quick question. If a decision's made to hire somebody, right away to be a youth director or whatever, if that person happens to be a pastor, does that pastor have to be called? You have to go through the call process if a person applies for the job as a pastor?
Maybe. We would have if they're on, the synod would have to get involved. We couldn't just bypass. It would not be a good plan to bypass them. What we perceived as bypassing.
The one thing that we are failing to mention, and next week I promise you I'm going to stand up and say this in a loud voice, is the fact about Pastor Chris and what's going on with her personally, and we need to share that
on the priority list.
And that's a big one that we will talk about next week. I know she will be, and the last week, council members know this.
Could you mention the email address that if any member of the congregation has a question and wants to...
Yeah, it's the last slide. Either ask council, that goes to Laura, or council chair goes directly to me. And we will get out the YouTube links for both this week and last week. I'll get somebody to help me with constant contact today or tomorrow. But the last week is already up on YouTube. If you search for it, maybe you can find it, but it is there. There's 8 parts.